Thanks everyone for being here. Today we're talking about something that sounds like it's a trend or a fad, but it's actually been deeply grounded in strategic marketing for decades. Account-based marketing, or ABM, isn't about new software and intimidating formulas. It's about doing smarter marketing, especially in healthcare where time, budgets, and customer mindshare is incredibly limited. So if you've ever felt like you're shouting into the void with marketing, this session is for you. This webinar was created for MedTech marketing leaders, founders and CEOs, commercial and sales executives, and even product launch teams. This group tends to live at the intersection of strategy and reality. Marketing leaders who need results, founders who need traction, commercial teams who need the doors opened, and product teams who need adoption. And ABM works best when all of those perspectives are aligned, which is why this approach resonates so well in MedTech. Before we go on, I just want to tell you who are speaking with you today. I'm joined by our founder, Lisa Bixel. Thanks for being here, Lisa.
Glad to be here, Lauren, and to continue this webinar series that share what we've learned over our individual experiences as well as collectively at BMMG.
Awesome. So, Lisa Bixel brings over 40 years of experience in medical sales, marketing, and commercial leadership. She's helped medtech companies of all sizes launch products, build market presence, and accelerate growth. Lisa also published a book last year, So You're Launching a Medical Device, which will be made available to you for free if you book a discovery call with us after the webinar. It's also available for purchase on Amazon. And I'm Lauren Dustman. I'm CEO of BMMG, and I've spent over a decade helping medtech companies elevate their brand, drive sales, and break through in competitive markets. Our team knows what it takes to move from early traction to commercial success, and we bring that experience to every client we partner with. Now, who is BMMG? Well, a quick word on who we are and why our perspective on ABM comes from real experience. BMMG is an outsourced medical marketing department, not an agency that just executes tasks, but a team that thinks like it sits inside your organization. And our team, as you can see on the slide, has worked across a wide range of clinical areas. So we understand how clinical priorities, commercial realities, and operational constraints all collide in the real world. We've supported companies at very different stages, from early innovation to established market leaders. And the logos that you see here at the bottom of the screen are just a snapshot, but the common thread is this. These teams needed marketing that understood their buyers, respected the complexity of healthcare, and supported their sales in a meaningful way.
And Lauren, I just want to point out that the healthcare verticals shown here are, yes, where we have a ton of experience, but there are other care areas and service lines where we also have depth, such as dermatology, women's health, and others. So I just wanted to point that out.
Good call out, Lisa. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to the most important part of today, you. So let's start with the reality. Most of you are working with small sales teams, tight budgets, and decisions that feel high stakes because they are. There is no room for wasted effort. And because of that, you're trying not to win everywhere. You're trying to win somewhere that actually matters. Growth doesn't come from being visible to everyone. It comes from being relevant to the right people and organizations. And when you focus on those right accounts, you can shorten sales cycles by aligning directly to what each strategic target cares about most, their priorities, their pressures, their internal initiatives. That alignment builds trust faster and removes friction from the sales process. And here's the key distinction. ABM doesn't mean you stop selling broadly. That awareness still matters. What you do stop doing is selling deeply to everyone. Depth is reserved for the accounts that earn it. ABM helps you decide who those accounts are. That shift in focus is the foundation of everything that we're about to talk through. Okay, so before we go any further, I want to get a quick pulse check. Are you currently focused on a one-to-many approach in identifying prospects and moving customers along in the funnel? Or have you embraced the concept of one-to-one ABM marketing? This isn't a test, it's just for context. So if you've started experimenting with ABM, that's great. Even if you're just dipping a toe in, that usually means you felt some friction with this one size fits all messaging and wanted to try something more targeted. So just go ahead and answer honestly. There's no right or wrong here. This just helps us tailor the rest of the conversation. All right. So taking a look at the results here, it looks like the majority of people have initiated the concept of ABM, which is great. So, those who haven't started yet, that's okay too. Our content here is for folks who are at the very beginning of their journey and those who have already initiated. And we're sure you guys will find some pearls and insights wherever you are on your ABM journey.
Okay, so this quote really sort of encapsulates the essence of account-based marketing. So for a long time, marketing success has been measured by reach and impressions and clicks and volume. And those metrics absolutely have their place in the marketing world. But in healthcare, reaching everyone rarely moves the business forward as well as what matters is reaching the people who can actually influence the decisions and drive adoption. So again, everyone, if you treat them the same, it doesn't have as much stickiness and benefit to you as identifying those who are truly the right ones who can make a difference for you in your growth trajectory. So ABM is about shifting that focus from counting activity to creating impact. So from how many people were seeing your message to whether the right people felt like your message resonated with them and they felt understood. That's the mind shift that we're going for today. So that's the conversation that you're going to see pervasive through the rest of our slide deck.
Excellent. Also, you'll see the slide appear several times throughout today's webinar. Think of this as our roadmap. You always know where we are, what we've already passed, and what's coming up next. So now on to the basics of ABM. So let's take a step back and level set on what ABM actually is. This might be remedial for some of you who are attending since you've already indicated that you're doing it. For others, this is a great way to set the stage. So as I shared, ABM isn't new. It's really just a modern name for strategy that's been around for a long time. Focus your effort where it matters most. What's different today is that we have much better data and digital tools, which allow teams to be far more intentional and precise about where they spend time, money, and energy.
A simple way to think about it is something like job recruiting. So, for roles that really matter, you don't post one generic job description and hope the right person finds it. You identify a few strong candidates and are proactive at going out to see what motivates them and tailor your outreach specifically to the top candidates you hope to recruit. That's the core idea of ABM. You stop treating all customers the same. And in healthcare, that matters a lot because every organization has different pressures, different priorities, and even decision dynamics.
Right. So instead of spreading yourself thin, ABM asks you to focus on a smaller set of accounts and truly understand them, who they are, how they make decisions, and what success actually looks like in their world. And when you do that, your conversations change. Your outreach feels more relevant, your sales process feels more aligned, and you spend less time chasing accounts that were honestly never a great fit to begin with.
That depth is what creates relevance, and relevance is what moves deals forward in complex healthcare environments. So, now let's talk about why this approach is especially important in MedTech.
So, as we all know, healthcare cycles are long, complex, and high stakes. Decisions can often take a year or more because they affect patients, budgets, and reputations. And those decisions, they're not just made by one person, they're made by buying committees, clinical leaders, finance, supply chain, administrators, and they all have different priorities. And ABM is built for that reality.
Operationally, this is where teams feel the strain. One size fits all messaging doesn't work when you're selling into a committee. Sales ends up re explaining the story. Marketing assets feel too broad and momentum can slow. So, ABM forces clearer planning. Who are we talking to? What do they care about? How do we support the sales conversation instead of creating more work for it?
And honestly, the results back this up. In B2B environments very similar to healthcare, 76% of marketers report higher ROI from ABM. And companies with mature ABM programs attribute nearly 80% of new opportunities to it.
That's why quality over quantity shows up as better preparation, stronger alignment, and more durable relationships. Fewer accounts, better focus, growth that actually sticks.
Okay, quick check-in on our roadmap. We've covered the intro and we've grounded ourselves on the basics of ABM. So we're officially past the what is it stage. So now we're at a really important turn in the road, choosing your targets. This is where ABM either works beautifully or unfortunately falls apart. The rest of the strategy only works if you're focused on the right accounts to begin with. Let's talk about choosing our accounts wisely. Do not boil the ocean. With ABM, it's important to slow down and be disciplined, which I know can be very hard. But one of the biggest mistakes teams make is trying to do ABM with too many accounts at once. That is boiling the ocean. It creates activity, but not progress. Personalization gets diluted, follow ups slip, and teams feel stretched instead of focused. And that's why we recommend starting with 5 to 10 high value accounts. That number is intentional. It forces prioritization and it creates space for real depth without losing commercial interest. When you're prioritizing, look beyond revenue alone. Strategic fit matters, visibility and influence matter. Is this account one others in the market pay attention to? Are they open to innovation? Does their disease focus and patient mix align with where you actually win?
And here's where this becomes very practical. When you narrow your list, you should be able to answer three simple questions for every account. Who owns that relationship? What problem are we solving for them specifically? And what would success look like in the first 6 to 12 months? If you can't answer those clearly, the account probably doesn't even belong on your ABM list, or at least yet. So we encourage teams to pressure test targets operationally. Can sales realistically stay engaged with this account? Can marketing support personalized outreach without scrambling all the time? If the answer is no, that's a sign to perhaps pause and refocus. Another thing, proximity matters more than people like to admit, especially for a lean sales team. Accounts that are easier to visit, follow up with, and build cadence around often move faster simply because consistency is easier to maintain. Another critical piece is alignment. Target selection cannot live in marketing alone. Sales needs to help shape the list, not just receive it. So we often recommend a working session where sales and marketing rank accounts together and agree on why each one made the cut. When that alignment happens, execution improves dramatically. Follow up is cleaner, insights get shared faster, and ABM starts to feel manageable instead of overwhelming.
Exactly. And that's why the takeaway here is really simple, is that your focus creates power. Like we said, you do not win ABM by doing more, you win by choosing better. So now let's talk about a way to sharpen your focus, and that's reverse engineering. A lot of teams assume ABM starts with net new targets, but very often our best clues are already inside our organization. So if you have a few solid customers, that is gold. Look at what these accounts have in common. Who are they? How did you get them? What made the sales process smoother or faster compared to others? So when you slow down and really study your wins, patterns will start to emerge. A specific service line, a particular internal champion, a certain size or type of organization. The goal here is not to build a bigger list, it's to identify repeatable criteria. You're creating a lens, a filter that you can use to evaluate every future prospect and ask whether this looks like success or whether it looks like noise.
And this is where reverse engineering really helps remove the guesswork. Instead of chasing accounts that look good on paper, you're letting real experience guide your decisions. When you use what's already worked as your starting point, targeting receives and it becomes more confident. You're more focused. It's much easier to align across the different teams, sales and marketing and leadership. And you're not guessing anymore. You're building off of proof.
Okay, so we've picked the right accounts. Now comes the fun part. This is where ABM stops being theory and starts sounding impressive, if I do say so myself. Show them you know them. This next section is all about doing your homework and using it to really stand out in the room. Show them you know them, baby.
When we say go deep, we don't mean boil the ocean research like we just talked about. We're not intending to do that. That is the wrong approach to take. We mean using data and insights to build a complete, useful picture of the account before you ever show up in a select, focused group of accounts. So start with the basics. Who actually makes decisions here, not just by title, but also their real influence. Then look at what's driving the organization right now. Are there growth initiatives, pain points, service lines that are under pressure? Those are the clues that tell you where your message will actually resonate. Leadership matters too. How long have people been in their roles? New leaders often come with, an openness to change just because they're a part of a change initiative. Long tenured leaders usually are maybe a little more reluctant to change. So you might have some very clear priorities and strong opinions from them, and you might have to work a little harder. So both are incredibly useful if you understand, what's going on there at the leadership helm. You also want to understand reputation. How is the service line where your product fits in? How is that viewed in the market? And how are they positioning themselves? Is it that they're saying that they're an innovative initiative and a service line that is really embracing new technology? Are they conservative? Is it really high volume? That context should help you shape how you frame your messaging and you show up. And don't skip their own messaging, ads, billboards, press releases. Organizations tell you exactly what they care about if you're paying attention. The goal here isn't to impress anyone with facts, maybe a little, but it's about being able to walk into the conversation already speaking their language.
Yes, and this is where I pause and I ask myself, I ask my commercial teammates one simple question. What keeps my targets up at night? And if I can't answer that, if you can't answer that, then we're probably not ready to have a meaningful conversation with them yet.
Yes, exactly. And if you want help making this repeatable, that's why we created the BMMG sleuthing guide. It helps turn this from an art into a process your team can use again and again. And we'll talk more about that at the end of this program.
You sure will.
When we talk about showing accounts that you truly know them, this is where a lot of teams stop too early. They understand the hospital or the health system, but they don't always understand the physicians or the clinicians inside it. So in MedTech, that's a miss. Clinicians often influence what gets adopted, how it gets used, and whether something really has stickiness long term. The good news is that this doesn't have to be guesswork anymore. There are tools that help you see real patterns. You can identify who's performing the most advanced procedures, who's handling complex cases, and who tends to be early in adoption of new approaches. And once you have that visibility, you can start asking much smarter questions about influence and not just volume. So even training and background matter as well. So whether there's somebody who has a fellowship history, academic affiliations, professional societies, two physicians in the same specialty can actually behave very differently and have different perspectives based on their experiences and those differences in their background. So the differences help shape how you should then evaluate how you approach them with your messaging so that they feel better understood and it resonates with them.
Yes, and even when physicians aren't the final decision makers, they are sharing opinions behind the scenes, they're advising committees, driving utilization, and definitely influencing their peers. So if you don't understand who those physicians are and how they operate, you're really only seeing half of the picture. where they get their patients, whether they're referral hubs, how connected they are to feeder hospitals or networks. Those signals tell you a lot about their real influence. And this is where we always remind teams. The goal isn't to impress anyone with how much you know, as much, as it is impressive. The goal is to be prepared. When you understand the physician landscape, your outreach becomes so much more relevant, more respectful, and grounded in reality.
And that's when a real relationship can begin to be built. So you leverage that and it starts to appear. There's shared mentors, perhaps, that you know so much about them, you know where they came from with their alumni ties, their co-published research. You can leverage that. Those aren't just shortcuts, they're context, and they help you enter a conversation with a prospective customer, one of your ABM targets, with a lot more credibility instead of any kind of a cold introduction.
Exactly. And when you know the physicians, you're not just selling into an account, you are starting to navigate that account intelligently.
So this is where all that research starts to show up in a way your accounts can actually feel. Every engagement should make it clear that this organization is your focus, not one of many on a long list. When you personalize well, you're essentially saying to them, I've done my homework because I believe your organization can benefit the most in this market with my technology from what we can offer for you. And so that mindset and that expression to them just changes the dynamics and can really start the conversation initially off on a better foot, and the flow becomes a lot easier afterwards.
Yes, and I have to say this, personalization does not mean a clever subject line or swapping in their logo. It means tying your solution directly to what they care about as an institution, their priorities, their pressures, their goals for growth or efficiency or outcomes. When you do that, you're no longer pitching, you're aligning.
And that alignment shows up in how you frame the conversation. You're not talking about your product in isolation. You're talking about how it fits into their world, their strategy, their market. That's what helps them see you as a potential partner and not just another vendor trying to get a meeting.
Yes, and one of the most powerful moments in ABM is when you can reflect something back to them that they may not have fully articulated themselves, an insight about their service line, their positioning, or their growth trajectory. That's when that trust accelerates because they realize that you're thinking about their business just as deeply as they are.
And that is absolutely the goal here. Every interaction should reinforce, again, that message you gave up front. We chose you for a customer. We chose you to be our partner in this market because we felt that your alignment with us makes the most sense and will resonate the best. And so we're committed to you and you're our singular focus. And when you do that, everything else just falls into place.
Okay, so you've chosen the right accounts, you've done the homework, and this is the point where you can start putting all of that insight to work. Activation and engagement aren't about doing more. Again, we're not boiling the ocean. They're about showing up in the right moments with the right message for the right people. Let's dig in.
So, yes, this is where you operationalize everything you've learned so far. For each strategic account, you should have a clear multi channel plan, not generic outreach, not one to many, not one size fits all, but intentional touch points designed around this particular account. That can include thought leadership content that reflects their priorities. It could be custom demos or lunch and learns tailored to their specific departments and environment, and peer-to-peer engagements that let them hear from someone they specifically trust, they've got a history with.
Mm-hmm. And the reason that multi-channel approach here matters is because buying does not happen in one interaction, as we all know. So according to multiple B2B studies, buyers typically need repeated exposure before something starts to even stick. Some research shows that it takes 6 to 8 meaningful touch points just to establish a base level of familiarity. And broader B2B data suggests that buyers may experience dozens of interactions over a long buying cycle before making that final decision.
And that is especially true in healthcare. You're not trying to land everything in just one meeting. You're building an understanding over time. That's why hospital leadership briefings, for example, aren't product pitches. They're moments to show that you understand their institutional goals, pressures, constraints, and that you reinforce the same story that they're hearing in other interactions.
Yes, and consistency is what makes those touch points effective. If somebody reads your thought leadership, attends a demo, and then hears about you from a peer, it should all reinforce the same message. That repetition is what builds trust, and trust is what keeps you in the conversation over that long sales cycle.
And that's the ultimate high bar that's raised here. You want each touch point to earn its place by adding clarity or credibility. It gets you a step above and beyond anything else in any other customer interactions. And likewise for your customers to have any interactions with their vendor partners. It just feels different and they like it and they want more of it. When you do that well, engagement feels like it's really well coordinated. It's not overwhelming to you or to your customer. And it becomes much easier for the account to say, yes, I want to move forward on this. Okay, so this is the elephant in the room and the reality check. Oftentimes we do feel like, people at this point of hearing about ABM are already going, oh my gosh, how do you scale if you're only focused on a few accounts and you're doing this work? And so we just need you to bear with us and hear that this is just a mind shift. This shift is account-based marketing isn't about limiting growth. It's about this keyword sequencing it. It's going to happen, but you're just going to do it right and in the right order. So when you go broad too early, teams get stretched too thin, adoption stays shallow. ABM lets you now switch things and go deep with the right accounts first, creating reference sites, internal champions, and truly gaining traction in the market. So those early wins make every future sale easier, faster, more credible. So ABM is not about how you stay small or that you have to be small or think small. It's about learning how to scale and scale properly because of how well you did a foundation level. So, and when you sequence growth this way, when you go deep before you go wide, this is what happens. And tee up next slide. It's
Payoff.
it's the payoff. Yes. This is what all that focus buys you when ABM is done well. You stop chasing accounts that were never going to be a good fit. Instead, you secure right fit customers, the ones who understand your value, adopt more fully, and stay longer because the partnership actually works for both sides. It's the win-win.
Exactly. And that's really what shifts the relationship. You're no longer closing these one-off deals. You're building long-term partnerships because you've taken the time to understand the organization, the stakeholders, the physicians, and you create internal champions who advocate for you when you're not even in the room.
And those champions matter. They drive utilization. They help with expansion. They become reference sites that make future sales, again, easier, faster, and more sticky over time. That truly is what snowballs when you approach an ABM methodology.
Yes, and the ROI truly does reflect that. According to ITSMA, ABM delivers roughly 2 times higher ROI than traditional B2B marketing. It's because teams are doing the right things for the right accounts.
So the payoff sort of in summary on this slide is that when we talk about that, again, the benefit and the payoff, what we mean is higher utilization, a stronger advocacy base, more durable and predictable growth, all driven by your focus upfront and your intentionality. Okay, this is a slide that always looks just so intimidating, and there's a lot of content here, but rest assured, even though it's an eye chart and you probably can't read much of the words, we will be making these decks available to you at the end of our program. So don't worry about it. Just, sit back and listen. Um, this slide here is intended to make ABM feel real because what we've got here are 4 common MedTech scenarios that we see over and over again across different stages and product types. Yes, different challenges maybe, but the same underlying approach focus, alignment, and intentional engagement applies. So if you look at the first example, this was an early stage therapeutic MedTech company working with a regional health system. There was interest, plenty of meetings, but no momentum. Sales was stuck at the department level. The shift happened when they stopped chasing broadly and instead chose just one health system as a true priority and one facility within that system. They mapped the clinical, operational, and economic stakeholders. They aligned the messaging to that system's growth and quality initiatives, and they treated it like a long-term partnership, which resulted in the executive sponsorship being achieved, a multi-site rollout ultimately being a part of their success, and a reference account that instead of being a stalled account became just this future feeder of new business growth.
That's great. And so the second example shows what ABM looks like when the barrier isn't interest, but it's prioritization. So this was an academic medical center where the product was seen as innovative, but not essential. Strong clinical champions existed, but there was no capital approval and too many competing budget priorities. So instead of trying to convince multiple centers at once, the team focused deeply on one AMC. They tied the value story to the institutional research goals, reputation, and throughput. So finance and operations were brought in early, this is very important, with customized data. That focus turned a nice to have into a budgeted priority that ultimately resulted in a flagship installation.
Great one. The third example here is one we see a lot with disposable or procedure-based medtech. The first, yes, happens, but adoption stalls, becomes sort of a dead account. Utilization stays limited to a small group of early users, and growth just really hits a plateau. So ABM reframed what happened after the sale. The account was treated as a long-term target, not a closed deal or a dead account. Internal champions were established, peer influencers were identified, and a multi-channel engagement plan was deployed across the service lines. So the outcome wasn't just higher utilization, but also expansion. Again, advocacy and in external speaking opportunities as well.
Yes, and this last example is about choosing the right first customer, especially in pre-commercial or an early launch scenario. So there was pressure to secure revenue quickly, as there always is, but also real risk in choosing speed over strategic value. Instead of spreading our bets, the team evaluated prospects through clinical, operational, and reputational lenses and chose one account aligned with long-term visibility and credibility. They invested deeply in understanding leadership priorities and success metrics. And that first win created strong buy-in, high utilization, and then the foundation to be able to scale into similar health systems.
So as we look back on these four scenarios, again, different situations, different products, but the same pattern really surface. ABM is not about doing something flashy. It's about making deliberate choices, going deep in an account where it's going to matter, and letting those wins ultimately generate momentum for other business growth.
And that's why ABM just works so well in MedTech. It matches our reality of those long sales cycles, the complex decision making, and the need to establish credibility over time. So, as we start to move into our Q&A, the big idea we want you to leave with is that ABM is intentional by design. It's not about more activity, as we've shared. It's not about more campaigns, more noise. It's about being deliberate in where you can focus and how you show up. Personalization and strategy are not extras here, they're really the foundation.
And that starts with knowing your accounts better, perhaps, than they even know themselves. Not just the organization, but the people, the leaders, the pressures that they face, the decision dynamics. Knowing all of that, and it just strengthens that relationship, and they get the sense that you really are truly invested in them. When you do that work up front, your outreach feels relevant and is not disruptive. And the conversations move faster because you're already aligned with language that matters to them and purpose and goals and benefits of your technology that align with, again, their big initiatives.
Yes, and I have seen this in practice. When you win the right business, everything downstream improves. Adoption is stronger, relationships last longer, and expansion happens so much more naturally. You're not constantly dealing with churn, you're building momentum.
That's why we keep coming back to this idea of going deep and not wide. ABM rewards your focus. The teams that win aren't the ones doing the most, they're the ones choosing better, executing more thoughtfully, and building credibility over time. So, this quote really does sort of encapsulate the heart of everything we've been talking about today. Account based marketing is not about forcing your product into as many places as possible. It's about understanding your customers so well that your solution naturally fits into what they're trying to achieve. In medtech, especially, success doesn't come from pushing features. It comes from aligning with real clinical, operational, and financial needs and values. When you truly know where your accounts are that are going to resonate most with your messaging and you've done your homework, you stop asking, how do we sell this? You start asking yourself instead, where does this actually belong?
Mic
And
drop.
that, yes, exactly, mic drop. And it's an epiphany. Yeah. And that mindset shift is what turns ABM from a tactic into a growth strategy. You're not chasing demand, you're building relevance. And when you do that consistently, the right customers don't just buy, they stay, they expand, and they advocate. So, this is how you build durable growth in complex healthcare markets.
Okay. Now, before we move into Q&A, I've got one last question for you. I'll keep it easy. If you would be open to a quick discovery call to explore whether ABM could work for your team, just answer yes or no in the poll. If you say yes, our webinar admin will drop a link into the chat so you can book time with us directly. There's no prep required, zero pressure, just a focused conversation to see if this makes sense for where you are as a business today. And if now's not the right time, that's totally fine too. We're glad that you spent time with us today. All right. So excellent. We'll give you guys just a couple more seconds, and then we are going to move on to our Q&A. So drop your questions in the Q&A box, whether they're strategic, tactical, or very specific. Um, we'll use this time to try to make the conversations as useful and practical as possible. And I apologize, I saw that somebody had raised their hand, and so I can't click on you to unmute you, but you can drop a question in the Q&A box.
Great. So, Lauren, it looks like as we've been presenting, there's been a few questions that have come through. And as I address these and we do it together, maybe that will also give people more time to ask other questions. And again, you can put it in the chat, yes, but there's also a Q&A button at the bottom where you can post your questions. So here's one that came through earlier, Lauren. It says, for an early stage medtech company, what's the best place to start with ABM if resources are extremely limited? So do you want to take that one?
Sure. So I would say take maybe three accounts that you think are strategic for various reasons you've identified, like using some of the criteria we talked about earlier in the presentation. And then you do your sleuthing or your detective work on these three accounts, and you start to build familiarity with whatever data you can find. What matters most? What are their goals that tie back nicely to your innovation? And then field test it. Out of this, you will have made assumptions, tested them, but done it on a small scale to see if the efforts you've invested is actually paying you back with responsiveness, interest, shortened sales cycles, and so on.
Great. Here's one. Do you have suggestions on how to present this methodology to a vice president of sales? I thought I'd go ahead and address that one. So the the audience with your sales leadership is really vital. First of all, because as we said before, this whole effort should be collaborative. You should schedule time to get together, agree that you're maybe chasing your tails or you have dead accounts, things that haven't been sticky. Acknowledging the current status of the sales and the customer base would be key to have everybody go, what we're doing isn't necessarily working, A. So there's your foundation. Then move them to B, which is what do we do differently? And, ABM, again, I think even from a sales perspective, sometimes feels like a little jargony from marketing to sales. So, break that down. Maybe don't even call it ABM per se. It's really about just saying to them, hey, let's agree that what we really need is a deep, rich relationship with a few key accounts where they're advocates and they're expanding and they're where our thought leaders are. Our speakers bureaus come from them, and our white papers and other published articles. These are the key accounts for us. And sit down with sales and say, let's define, how did we get these accounts? Where did that come from? And when you can do that and articulate, what was it? Was it a relationship? Was it something that they saw? Was it built over time? Figure out, how do you replicate that success with some other accounts? And again, with sales and marketing both, and maybe even leadership and clinical, but a team that will be, a good change management solution on your end by including the people that might be naysayers or obstacles down the road. Include them so that collaboratively you come up with the criteria, that lens you look through to say, here, I've got 10 opportunities that I can chase down. I'm going to look through this lens. Which ones measure up to our criteria we created together? And the other thing for your sales leader to hear from you is really the promise that this is going to be building a foundation for future sales growth. If you do this well, you work it together, ask for their trust and collaboration, that other things will fall in place more easily down the road. Okay. Here's
I
another
see
one.
another. Oh,
Go
I
ahead.
got another one in the from the chat. For a company that distributes the same products that the prospect is already using, what would you recommend? Seems like it's always a price thing at the end of the day.
For a company that distributes the same products that the prospect is already using. So yes, good point. I think, Lauren, here, I'll take that one. In the end, it is you even looking at your product differently and helping them to see it differently. So we always, tell people, let's say you sell a commodity item that is just such a product that nobody thinks is really that significant in a way to adopt this technology, or that you sell a product that is even on the high end, and budgets are so precious and few. You've got to get out of this bottom level of thinking and elevate it. You've got to understand this account deeply. Again, their leadership, their initiatives, go to their website. How do they advertise? When they advertise, what do they say? How does your product, and this is a mapping exercise. And if you don't know how to maybe get started, again, circle back with us. We're happy to just brainstorm with you on a discovery call that, we'll share what we can. But, the goal is to tie your product to solving some big problem that they have, some initiative that they're embracing, something visible that they're doing in the market, so that they remove themselves from the product level itself, whether the price is low or it's a commodity, to an expensive product to adopt. They see it as a bigger picture item. It solves bigger problems than just your company selling technology to them. You've got to elevate their thinking and see how it helps support their initiatives in the long term. Hopefully I got that right. Lauren, what would you add to that?
I think it's just echoing what you're saying is that if you have widget A and the prospect already has widget B, and they have, very similar, they solve similar problems, they have similar tech hardware. We don't care that they already have widget B. We're going to take our widget A. We're not going to talk about the purple button or the blue switch. We're going to talk about how widget A advances growth, it meets their critical goals that they're trying to set for a service line or for an overall organization, and talk about how it differentiates them in the market amongst their peers. It can, help differentiate them for patients. So again, as Lisa said, we got to pull back and elevate. We can't just be looking at our tech and the cool widgets that it has. We have to be tying it to value for them. And that is just us rethinking how we talk about our product from the ground up.
Great. Laura, here's another one that's come in. ABM sounds time intensive. How do you know it's worth the effort compared to traditional demand gen? You want
Yeah,
to, okay.
I'll take that. I am not going to lie. ABM does take more effort up front. It can feel like a little bit of a long slog. You got to go slow to ultimately go fast, but this effort has a much higher return. Traditional demand generation, it does create volume, it maybe creates awareness, and there's definitely a place for that, but ABM improves the quality. And so instead of spreading your team thin across dozens of accounts that may or may not be a good fit, ABM focuses time on just a few where adoption, expansion, and advocacy are truly possible. And you'll know that it's worth it when you start to see downstream those win rates improve, the sales cycles will shorten, and early customers are not going to become a one and done, you know, dud, for lack of a better term, account. They're going to become reference sites. So again, it's not about doing more and having more visibility and making more noise. It's about making the work that you're already doing count for more.
Okay, here's one. What does, I think, early success with ABM look like before deals actually come to a close? I'll go ahead and tackle that one. So you know you're doing something right if you start to see these types of things, and it helps you to just get reinforcement that something is different with this particular account and this particular approach. So you've stimulated a much earlier and deeper conversation with your targeted customers. So, you're getting more time. You ask for 5 minutes, they give you 15. They're sharing more than you normally have shared with you. That just starts to feel like, they're tasting this and they like it and they want more. And that's certainly a buying signal that the ABM is a good pathway for them. Another one might be that, again, they're just agreeing to take your calls and to have a meeting and to, attend a dinner discussion and things like that. Whereas otherwise customers have not been so willing to give you their time. And then you may even be getting asked, and this is a real indicator, especially because if you've done your homework, you'll be coming in with, again, a lot of depth of information about this account and what makes them tick. And so they'll maybe look at you and go, where did you get that information? And because it's data that they might not already know or have access to, you've intrigued them and they're wanting to know. And this just reinforces when you tell them at the beginning, hey, you are my top priority. Yes, we have technology that can work, but we've felt like you're the right partner in this market because it feels like you're the one whose initiatives and your advertising and your messaging and just the volume that you do and your new CEO leader and some of these other things that you've embraced in the past technology wise makes you the best partner for us. And so we've done our homework, and I might just validate some of my data with you, but I'm not going to grill you and ask you a bunch of questions and profile you. I've done that on my own. And one of the things I wanted to share, just in my experience, is that in doing this with, a really savvy sales manager, a territory manager, a regional director, they've actually gotten on the phone and called and talked to the techs and the nurses and the administrators of a department. And, they've done a lot of their own detective work. In addition to what you can gather online, they've actually talked to people. And so when they come in and they say, I talked to Susie, or, maybe it's anonymous, right? I've talked to some of your techs and they're very unhappy with, some of the process processes, and they feel like you should be embracing some new technology. Again, you have to be careful how you phrase that, but it's really important for your research and your homework to be exhaustive. And so that's just a tidbit that I remember sharing or hearing about with one of my clients. Sales teams. So anyway, I think that answered the question. I have another one here. This is how do you know when an account is not the right fit for ABM, even though they've shown early interest, Lauren? Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. So, a target, may not be the right candidate if they're doing some of these things. If they are isolating your interactions to just one contact point instead of opening it up to the organization for broader discussion, that is a red flag. Um, Other red flags are misaligned priorities. If there's no clear internal owner at your target site, if you are constantly dealing with repeated delays without progress, or if a value conversation never moves just beyond that initial curiosity. And so, while we never want to just walk away from interest, we do need to reallocate how deep we go with certain customers. And if an account can't engage at the level that's required for mutual success, we just, we keep them warm and we focus our deepest efforts elsewhere. And there is nothing wrong with that.
Okay, so Lauren, it looks like nothing has shown up from our Q&A or our chat as any new questions. So let's just say to everybody, if something comes to you after the fact or in the next 5 minutes as we kind of wrap up, feel free to keep pinging us. We'll address it offline, but make sure that all your questions do get answered, and we'll share that with everybody. So,
Absolutely.
Lauren, yeah.
Okay. Now, before we wrap, we want to make sure you leave with something tangible. So, everything we've talked about today, the focus, the targeting, the research and engagement, that only works if you can then put it into practice. So, along with the recording and the slides from today, we'll be sharing some practical resources. As Lisa shared earlier, you'll be receiving BMMG Sleuthing Guide to help you kickstart your account research, and you'll get our Fit and Readiness Scorecard, which gives you an objective way to assess whether an account is truly right for your ABM approach. So, if you want to go deeper, we also recommend you picking up Lisa's book, which dives into account-based marketing and also a lot of related strategies in a lot more detail. We really hope that today's session gave you practical ideas and fresh perspectives on how to really embrace ABM within your organization. And if you're looking for tailored support, whether that's developing your own ABM initiative or fine-tuning what you've already begun or talking about different multi-channel approaches and execution, we would really love to work with you. You can book a call with our team, and let's make a conscious decision to truly focus your sales and marketing resources where they will yield the greatest return. So thank you all so much for joining us today.
Yes, thanks so much for your time, your valued time today. And we do hope to keep the dialogue going.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.